Thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm really excited to dive into this office hours, both to learn all about Emily's 6-step playbook to hitting six figures, and also because a core goal of Dreamers and Doers is to amplify you and your journeys. And one of the ways we achieve this is by facilitating game-changing educational events such as this one to give us all the opportunity to up-level together. So before we officially begin, I want to share a bit of background information on our esteemed expert. Emily is the founder of the Stylist LA, a clothing rental company, and the co-founder of My Founder Circle, a community for female founders looking to scale their businesses. While running the Stylist LA, she managed a team of over 15 employees and launched retail stores across California. She also raised over $1 million in venture capital after pitching to over 150 investors. Now, Emily helps other female founders scale their businesses through her second company, My Founder Circle. She is a founder who has intimately experienced the ups and downs of running her own company and has the perfect, unique experience to help others do the same. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Emily. We are so excited to learn from your expertise today. We know how valuable your time is. I know you have two little ones, a 7-week-old. So we're so grateful to you for investing in Dreamers and Doers in this way.
Of course. This is like my favorite thing to do. So this to me is a treat, doesn't feel like work. Thank you all so much for coming today. I just want to say first, I want this to be super interactive. So I want this to be more of a conversation than a presentation. I do have a presentation and I also have a pretty amazing, robust workbook for you guys that I'm going to share in a few minutes. But I want to start with telling you a little bit about my journey. So my first company, the Stylist LA, I started actually in 2009 out of my living room with a rolling rack in my living room. Pre-Rent the Runway, we did clothing rentals. It was about actually the time Rent the Runway started, but no one knew about them yet. I scaled that company to a 7-figure company. And what we're talking about today is scaling to 6 figures. And what I want to say is that when you launch your company or you're a founder who's doing 2K a month, or you've recently launched, you're a very different business and a very different founder than you are when you hit 6 figures and you have 10K months. And you're a very different founder and a very different business when you hit 7K. And I even think when you go from 100K to 250K a year to 500K to 750, there are a lot of changes that you need to make within yourself and within your business to hit those goals. So that's what we're going to focus on today. But I really want to make sure that you all ask your questions. Since it's a small group, you can either just chime in or raise your hand or put it in the chat, whatever is comfortable for you. I am a completely open book. So if you have any questions about my journey, I'm happy to answer them. To be completely honest, running the Stylist LA was very, very hard. It was really difficult. It's a very expensive, operationally intensive business that I started, and raising VC money was no joke. So I actually ran into a serious bout of burnout pre-pandemic, and we scaled back the company during the pandemic. And it's actually one of the best things that ever happened to us. We closed the retail stores. We're online only, subscription only now, and it's doing really well. And this is why I'm so passionate about helping other female founders, because I experienced the burnout. It was really tough on my mental health, and I want to help female founders avoid that if at all possible. So we'll jump in first to the presentation and we will go from there. Oh, first, actually, sorry, I want to share with you all the link to the workbook. So I have a co-founder with My Founder Circle. So her and I created this workbook together. It's pretty robust. That's the link for it if everyone wants to look at it. I'm going to go back and forth a little bit between the presentation and the workbook. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Hold on one second. I'm sharing my screen and we will get started. Okay. Okay. So can everyone see this okay? Okay, cool. So today we're going to talk about the steps that you need to hit to actually scale to a 6-figure business. And so what we're talking about with 6 figures, obviously, is 100K a year. And we like to say about 10K months. I'm not sure where all of you are in your business right now, but obviously, hitting 6 figures, I think, is something that people on Instagram and TikTok have made to look very easy. And it's not. It's really not. Scaling to 6 figures and beyond and scaling to 7 figures is something that takes a lot of strategy, a lot of planning, a lot of effort and a lot of grit. It's not something you go to overnight. And if I leave you with anything today, it's that my favorite quote is every overnight success is 10 years in the making. So just remember that. And if you hit 6 figures and if you hit 7 figures, I want to make sure you take the time to be pretty darn proud of yourself, because that is a big feat. Okay. So here are 8 steps to hitting a 6-figure business. And if I say our, it's me and my co-founder, my founder circle came up with this together. So I might be speaking for both of us a little bit in this. So just to go through these first, we'll be going into depth on each of these, but one is really focusing on your zone of genius. What are you truly a powerhouse at? 2, making sure you create systems in your business. 3, making sure you're consistent. 4, making sure you are always expanding your reach and getting more visibility for you and your company. 5, becoming a leader and moving from founder to CEO. 6 is product excellence, making sure that your product or service is always the absolute best that it can be. 7 is being intentional and knowing your why behind the business. And number 8, probably the most important, is knowing your numbers. I'm going to dive in. If any of you have questions, just please feel free. I might not see the hands if you raise them because I don't have the images in front of me. So maybe put them in the chat. Or Hannah, maybe you can tell me if someone raising the hand.
Definitely.
Okay. So before we begin, I want you guys to just take a minute or two and think about or write down, like, what are the big problems that your business is trying to solve or wants to solve? This really helps set the stage for like what you're doing in your business. And I always say your why and what the problems that you're solving can be anything from literally curing cancer to putting a smile on someone's face, right? Like if you're selling flowers, if you have a local flower shop, like maybe your why is making people's homes prettier, bringing a smile to someone's face daily. Like it can be something like that, or it can literally be if you have like a medical device company, like maybe you're saving people's lives. All of those are important. And I want you all just to take a minute to think about the big problems that your business is trying to solve. I'll give you a few. I'll keep talking, but I'll let you guys work on that while I'm chatting. Like for me, the Stylist LA, right, is the problem we're trying to solve is giving young women more outfits to wear for each event for a lower price point. They get to rent them and return them. So it's less closet clutter. It's better for the environment and they have more outfit options. My founder circle, we're trying to provide support for female founders that are launching and scaling their businesses. Does anyone have any questions on this or anything? Seems like everyone's okay with that. I will keep going if that's cool. Did everyone get the workbook link okay? Please let me know if you did not. Okay, moving on. First is to focus on your zone of genius. This is one of my favorite steps because I think this is something that a lot of times female founders get stuck on. What is one of the things that only you can do? Hold on, let me look in the chat really fast. Okay, perfect. See, you guys are saying yes. What are the things that only you can do? What is your secret sauce? What do you bring to the business as the founder that you cannot delegate? Those are the things that you need to be focused on. Those, and then also the things that really move the needle on your business. So I talk about this a lot. I think it is very easy to procrastinate by doing smaller tasks that don't matter. So an example is like scrolling on Instagram or doing research for your business. Or like, for example, with my founder circle, I think Pinterest is a really interesting marketing tactic. However, Pinterest doesn't move the needle for our business right now, right? So it's also not something that only I can do. So the way that I handle that is I usually set like a time limit for tasks like that for the week. So I'll say, okay, on Pinterest, I'll spend 30 minutes to an hour on Monday mornings working on Pinterest, but I set a time limit to make sure that the majority of my schedule and my time is focused on those money-making activities that only I can do. So we'll talk about this a little bit more with systems in a minute, about delegating and like what you can pass off to others, but it's really thinking through like, what are the things that like you have to do in your business? So because I have a product-based business and a service-based business, I like giving examples from both. So with the Stylist LA, for me, I have a superpower with buying. I'm really good at buying the inventory and making sure that it fits like a wide range of clients, fits different clients, fits their styles, and that these pieces do really well. So I don't have to, especially when the company got bigger, I don't have to run buying all the time, but I have to be involved in the process because that's something that I am uniquely good at. So I made sure that I always signed off on it and that I was always present in the buying. I also was really good at connecting with the consumer, and that was something that I prioritized. So I made sure I was in the stores, talking to the customers and things like that. What did I not need to do? Be planning out our social media, right? Or be emailing clients or working on our email blasts or uploading product to Shopify. Those were things that I did not need to be doing. And I needed to be focusing on the bigger tasks that really move the business forward. Now with my founder circle, what are the things that no one else can do? I have to have FaceTime with our clients, right? So we run a mastermind, we have VIP days, we have one-on-one clients. I have to be on those calls. I don't have to schedule email blasts. I don't have to create graphics for events. Those are all things that we pass off to our VA because those are things that other people can do. So I think it's really important. I'm going to actually, I think you guys can just see the workbook. I'm not going to actually switch and share because I think it'll be too confusing. But in the workbook, I have space for you guys to really think through, are there smaller tasks that you're using as procrastination? So for example, a lot of times founders will like go into research mode, like they need to launch a new product or a new service or, something new. And they're like, I'm going to research what everyone else is doing out there. And they spend hours and hours and hours and hours researching. And instead of actually moving forward and taking action on what they want to launch, they're stuck in research mode. I call it the Google rabbit hole. It's easy to get stuck in the Google rabbit hole or the comparison trap on Instagram or like seeing what others are doing on Instagram. And you get stuck doing that and you are not focused on actually doing the things that move your business forward. I don't know if anyone has any questions on this, but I think this one's a really big one. And for me, when I went from, 10K in revenue to 100K to eventually $1 million, this was something that truly helped me take it to the next level. So the biggest thing here is to identify what are the things that only you can do that are true money makers or needle movers for your business. Second step is systems. You need systems to scale. I think that is something obvious that we all know. What are items in your business that are replicable, that are things that you do over and over again that you can systemize? And there are different ways to do this, right? Based on, there's different ways to do this also depending on if you're a service or a product-based business. But if you're a service-based business, contracts for clients, onboarding emails for clients, do you have them fill out an onboarding form? Can you templatize that email with all of that information? Can you potentially put this in a Notion doc of here's a playbook of how we do this, and you can pass this on to a VA. So anything that's replicable. So again, service-based businesses, it's usually onboarding. You might have a playbook of how you work with clients, anything like that. For product-based businesses, it could be your email blasts. You might even want to have templates for the different types of email blasts you have. So maybe it's like my weekly product feature, a sale template, a template for special events or special like announcements, things like that, that just really save you time. And beyond saving just time, they also really save you brain power. So if you can not have to think about reinventing the wheel every time that you're creating those email blasts, that saves you brain power and time. You also can obviously do, like, as you're starting to delegate and as you're starting to hire people, you can do templates or playbooks or things like that for your internal systems. But really, like, even something as simple, systems can be robust or simple, right? So like you could even do something as simple as creating a templatized Gmail email. So when someone signs on with you, you have a templated email where you're like, okay, here's how, like, it's a welcome email. Here's a link to sign the contract here. And you put in that every time. Here is your Google Drive folder and you put in the link. Like, here's how it works. Like, that is a simple system you can use, or you can have a robust system that's like a CRM where, you know, it has more capabilities and it's something a little more sophisticated. Both of those things work, but systems are something that you absolutely need in order to scale because they save you time and will free up extra brain space so you can focus on your zone of genius. The third one is consistency. Consistency is really important, especially, I think, external consistency. That is how your customers and your potential customers view you. And what I'm going to do, I think, is actually go through the presentation and then I'll pull up the workbook and answer any questions or go through if anyone has any questions about that. So you want to make sure as you're scaling that you deliver the same quality and your best work every time you deal with customers. So you have to be consistent. I always use this example, but like if you're emailing your customers and potential customers every 9 months randomly, they're not going to view you as consistent. And one of the things I think we forget to talk about often is that your business looks more legit and more reliable the more consistent you are. So you don't have to send out an email every week, right? But maybe you send one out monthly and it's the first Monday of the month. That's consistency. And that will subconsciously make your potential customers and your customers view you as more reliable. An example that we did at the Stylist LA is we launched new arrivals every Monday. Now we do it once a month. So it's the first Monday of the month. That's something that customers can get used to and they can rely on and they can understand what's happening. You just want to make sure that you have a plan. I have a content calendar that I'm actually going to upload. I have a template. I'm going to put it in the chat in just a minute, but even posting out your content so that even on Instagram, like, do you have themes? Or are there things that you post every Monday, every other Monday? You just want to make sure that it's not erratic. Like if you're only posting on Instagram once every 7 months, your customers aren't going to view that as consistent. For a sales calendar, especially for a product-based business, like when are you launching new products? When are you launching your summer specials? When are you launching your holiday collection? Like you really want to make sure that all of that stuff is planned out and strategized so that you're consistent. You don't want to launch some things on Monday at 9 a.m. and some things on Thursday at 2 a.m. That just feels weird, right? And it's something that I think we forget that customers subconsciously judge us on. A marketing calendar. What are you marketing and when? And when are you launching new things? How are you talking to your customer about it? You want to make sure that also your communication with your customers is consistent with your brand image and your brand voice. So that's for external consistency. Internal consistency is within your team. And I think consistency and systems have a lot of similarities and they go really well hand in hand because systems make your business consistent, right? Like if you have a system and a welcome email you send your clients, that's consistent. And then all of your customers who are being onboarded all are getting the exact same thing they might have different links, right? To like their Google Drive folder, but it's all consistent. If you have systems for your email blasts as a product-based company, they're going to look, if you have templates, which is a system, they will look more consistent and the customer will begin to know what to expect from you. So for internal consistency, you want to make sure you have templates, like I said, clearly defined process. What do you do? Like, how do you do certain things? So how do you deal with the client? You could have a playbook for that. And one thing we did at my founder circle is like, we have a whole playbook on like what needs to happen before we host a webinar. What are the steps that we need to take when we log into a webinar? What are the steps that we do? So just making sure that it's always similar, right? And you're not doing anything that is totally off the wall. The internal process helps your internal team have a framework to follow so that you maintain that consistency. So our VA has like a whole playbook on when we have an event, she needs to make a Flowdesk sign up page. She needs to email the expert that we have coming in and ask for specific assets. Then she creates graphics. We post those on these specific days. So just making sure that these things really help you stay consistent. Does anyone have any questions so far? Or are we all good? Good so far? Okay. Moving on to expand your reach. This is something that is extremely important because this is how you continue to get new customers. Oh, let me see in the chat. Okay. I think you have to always, as a founder, be thinking about expanding your reach. This is really getting more visibility for you and your customer and your business. There are a million ways to do this. And I think this is something that really helped the Stylist LA reach 7 figures is I was always thinking, how do we get in front of more people? How do we get in front of more people? And the Stylist LA did it really creatively. We had a bunch of different ways we did it. We did tons of grassroots marketing. We did one of the first brand rep programs we created with college sorority girls to rent dresses through them. We dressed the girls on The Bachelor before anyone else was doing that. We did a ton of collaborations on Instagram, real life collaborations for events. We were always trying to get in front of new people. So that's something that I think is absolutely necessary if you want to scale because you need those sales to scale. make sure that you're meeting new people consistently and you're always giving. Like when you join a group like Dreamers and Doers, or you join a networking group, or you ask someone for collaboration, make sure you're thinking what's in it for them. It's really obvious if you're someone who is always trying to get instead of give. And I swear you will get more ahead by giving. So somebody posted the other day, and I thought this was really interesting. Like, one of the best ways to grow is to join 3 new groups and go in and just for 2 to 3 months, just help people out. And that's one of the best ways to grow. And I thought that was a really good point, because it's true, right? Like, how do you get in front of more people and have them view you as an expert and have them view you as credible? You help them, whether you're a product or a service-based business. Not everyone will be your ideal customer, and that's actually great, but how do we continue to reach the ones that are? So actually, I lied to you, because I want to jump over to the workbook for this, because I love the workbook pages on this. Sorry, guys. I'm going to go to, hold on. Sorry. Just opening making sure I'm on the right page. Okay. So this page is not what I was just talking about, but I think this page is super helpful, which is just figuring out what your funnel is. What's your high volume free offer? What are all these offerings? And even if you're a product-based company, like, your free offering might even be just like a tips and tricks email. And obviously, like, high volume, low cost could be something like a subscription model that you have, and your low volume, high cost could be like your higher end product. And for service-based businesses, these are a little bit easier. Like, your free one could be just a freebie, and you might have like group work that's less expensive, and your low volume, high cost is a VIP day or something like that. But moving on to what I was just talking about. So when you're expanding your reach, there are a bunch of different ways to do so. And Dreamers and Doers is actually such a great place for this, such a great place for collaborations, to be featured on podcasts, to be featured in new media. And these are things that you always want to be thinking about. So on the next page, I had, I want you to actually go in and write these out. So it's really helpful to think about other brands or companies or founders that are targeting the same target market as you or your company, but are tangential. So for example, with the Stylist LA, we were a clothing company. We worked really well, and still do, with wellness brands. The Stylist LA customer loves to exercise. We did a ton of collaborations with SoulCycle, Bar3, smoothie companies, new wellness, like, oh my gosh, we did so much, like, so many different companies that we did stuff with. We did events. And so for me with the Stylist LA, I actually had a goal of reaching out to 10 potential collaboration, 10 potential collaboration people a week. And that is really how we grew. We did a ton of different things, whether it was an Instagram giveaway, whether it was, they sponsored smoothies for an event we had, or we did an Instagram live, or anything like that. I was really open to how we actually collaborated, but I knew if they had a target market, that we both would benefit from collaborating in some capacity. I also want you to think about what media sources your customers are paying attention to. What are they reading? What are they watching? What are they listening to? And how do you get featured on those? I think, again, this is where Dreamers and Doers comes in. I think there's different, like, Dreamers and Doers had me featured in a NASDAQ article. That's incredible. That for me is more credibility. I just pitched to be featured in Create and Cultivate, and Create and Cultivate is more what my customers are reading, but NASDAQ helps build that credibility. So think about what your customers are viewing, how they view those things, like what makes you look more legit, where can you get in front of new people, and put those things here, whether it's podcasts, websites, newspapers, magazines, any of that stuff. Like, even being featured in someone's Instagram live might be helpful, but you really need to think about, and you can always ask your customers, like, what are you guys watching? What are you listening to? What are you reading? What do you pay attention to? And try and get featured in some of those channels. I don't know if anyone has questions about that, but there is space here to write those down. Now I'm going to go back to the presentation. I need Zoom to figure out a way to like do dual screens or something. Okay. So we talked about expanding your reach. Again, you need to be thinking about this almost every single day in your business. I think service-based businesses, it's sometimes a little less, because you have a higher order value and you need less customers, but you always need to be building your email list. You always need to be building, if you're big on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is you use, LinkedIn, you need to think about how you can add more people so that more people are seeing you and your business. And this is just a no-brainer for any business that wants to grow. And I think true like 7-figure founders, this is on their mind all the time. How do they get in front of more people? Next, becoming a leader. So it's really, really important that when you're thinking about scaling to 6 or even 7 figures, you think about shifting from a founder to a CEO. There are going to be a lot of shifts in you as a founder throughout the life of your company. I joke that being a founder is like the biggest professional development journey I've ever been on. And you want to make sure that you continue that and that you realize that. It's so important. The founder I was at the beginning of the Stylist LA was not the founder I was at 100K, was not the founder I was at 250K, and is definitely not the founder I am now. And I'm a way better founder for my founder circle because of all of that growth I did with the Stylist LA. So look at this as a long game. How do you continue to get better? What is the vision you have for yourself? What are your goals? What kind of leader do you want to be? I think that's something that is just so important to journal about or think about or talk to, whether it's a coach or a mentor about. How do you want to step into that 6-figure founder or 6-figure CEO? What does that 6-figure CEO look like for you? Because it's different for everyone. How will you get there? I think this is extremely important. How do you actually focus on that self-development? Do you have an accountability group? Do you have a coach? Do you have mentors? Do you have advisors? What self-development books are you reading? I think the thing that we overlook as founders, especially female founders, is that personal development and personal growth is one of the most important things that we will do. And even going back to talking about your zone of genius, right? And like how you focus your time and what you spend your time on, like that takes discipline. And that's something that took me a lot of time. Over time, I came up with those. I started having those habits of really focusing on the things that move my business forward. My businesses are so much better because of that, but it took a lot of time, personal growth, and discipline to get there. Who's your community? What communities are you in? Obviously, everyone knows the saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Make sure you're joining communities, especially like Dreamers and Doers, where there are people in them who will really encourage you to up-level yourself and your business. This is extremely important. Becoming a leader and working on professional development is something that I think has helped me immensely and really helped my companies grow. Especially when I was fundraising, like I had to reach a whole new level. And I joined a small group of female founders who were also fundraising to have support, accountability, and people to bounce stuff off of. So always focus on this and don't put this on the back burner, because I know as female founders, we often put ourselves last. And this is something that truly, without this, you can't hit the 6 and 7 figure mark. Product excellence. So this is something that I think should go without saying, is that you need to make sure that your product or service is the best that it can absolutely be. What transformation are you providing for your customer, right? Why are they buying your product or service? And make sure that it's the best that it can be. So this is something I think, the way that I really think that's best to say this is never take your eye off the product. You just can't, because if you're selling something and it sucks, no one's going to come back and keep buying it. And then you're never going to hit 6 figures or 7 figures. So don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to try new product lines. Don't be afraid to launch new things. All of these things are important because they help make sure that you're really giving the customer what they want. Make sure that you take customer feedback. I think it's really important. One thing we talk about at my founder circle is know when to take customer feedback and when not to, right? So like sometimes you might get customer feedback from someone who's not your ideal customer, and that's actually not helpful. And you want to make sure you have a little bit of blinders on to know when you actually should take the feedback and when you shouldn't. But one thing we did in our last mastermind that was extremely helpful is we had 10 founders and we did check-ins 3 times throughout the mastermind where they would fill out a quick survey and tell us what they were liking and what they weren't liking and what they wanted more of. And that was extremely helpful because it was our first mastermind. And one of the things they said was like, we need another one-on-one. And we were completely willing to do that. So we threw in another 30-minute one-on-one for them in the middle of the mastermind. So you just want to make sure you set up systems and a process for asking for customer feedback and getting it in enough time to be able to implement that feedback. we had a webinar recently with the founder of Kinfield, which is a skincare company. And Nicole Powell is the founder, and she's incredible. And she actually talked about something that I thought was really interesting from a product business standpoint, which was, she said, sometimes you have to kill your darlings. And I thought that was pretty cool to say, because it's true. She was like, we had to kill a product that I loved. It was our first product. I was obsessed with it. Nobody else was obsessed with it. And our profit margins sucked. And sourcing it was really hard. She was like, we had to kill it. And I didn't want to, because it was the one I loved. And so this is just, where you really focus on how do you make your product service the best it can be for your business, the most profitable, and how do you set your business up for success through your product or service. So be honest with yourself. If you have a service you're offering that takes tons of time and you don't make that much money off of it, maybe you have to kill that service. I shouldn't say kill. Kill is like an aggressive word, but you know what I mean? Maybe you have to sunset it. I think it's important to just remember that you will always be iterating and you will always be pivoting, even if you become a 7-figure business, right? Like maybe Peloton's a bad example right now, but like them coming out with the treadmill, that was a new product, even though they were doing really well with the bikes. Whether that was a good idea or not, I don't know, but you always have to be iterating, adding, and competing, and making sure that you have some competitive edge over your competitors with your customers. Okay. The next one, and we're getting close to the end of this, and then we'll go through the workbook. Your intentionality and knowing your why. Why did you start this company? What problems are you trying to solve? And are you building this company in alignment with your why? And the reason that this is so important, there's actually a bunch of different reasons, but one that I say is so you don't really burn out, right? Starting and running a company is hard, and scaling it's even harder. And you need to be connected to your why and what you're trying to solve in order to keep going. It will keep you going through the dark days. It will keep you going through the rough times. And that's just really important. So make sure you're connected to your why. Don't get caught up in the comparison trap. It's not helpful. I know we all have done it, but delete or silence anyone on Instagram who makes you feel less than. Stay attached to what your intentions are and why you started what you started. An example of this with the Stylist LA would be Rent the Runway, right? Like Rent the Runway was huge. They were a huge competitor. We competed with them aggressively, which was pretty cool because we did not raise $500 million. Now they've raised more than that, but that was what it was then. Sometimes I got caught up in the comparison trap of what they were doing, but we were such a different company than them, right? Like they had tons of money. They had a huge team. They were based in New York. They had a different client base than we did. So I had to stay connected to my why and what I was doing at the Stylist LA and why we existed, not why Rent the Runway existed for their customers. And that's just an example. In my founder circle, there's so many different communities and support for female founders. And everyone has a different reason for existing. Every company does. Every company's solving a different problem. And you want to make sure that you are not changing what you're doing based on what you've seen another company doing on Instagram, because that's not attached to your why. So I always say perform a quarterly check-in for your company and yourself and make sure that you are still aligned with why you started the company and your intention behind it. You're allowed to also change your why. I think that's something that's super important that female founders often forget, is you're allowed to change or pivot or shift your why or what you're solving for your customer. That's okay. Just make sure you know what it is and make sure that your company is aligned with it. Okay, the last step in hitting 6 figures, and actually I think this is the most important, is knowing your numbers. So if you want to hit 100K in revenue, how many widgets do you have to sell a month? How many of your product or service do you have to sell? We had a founder come to us recently, and I think it was June. And she said, I want to do $1 million in revenue this year. I said, okay, awesome. That's a great goal. How much have you done year to date? She said 30K, which is totally fine. You could do 970K in the last 6 months of the year, but how are you going to get there? And is that actually feasible? So we often see a lot of female founders say, I want to hit 100K. I want to hit 500K. And they don't know the steps to get there. I suggest building out a model in Excel, which is something I love to do, and figuring out how many of each of your products or services you have to sell to hit your revenue goal. One thing that's funny is I always have this number in my head, and I think it's 87,777, which is 1 million divided by 12. So that's what you need to hit monthly if you want to do $1 million in revenue on average. And keeping track of these numbers, right? So like, okay, let's say you're in February. How much money did you bring in January? And how much do you need to bring in every month for the rest of the year to hit that revenue goal? I also always suggest having 3 revenue goals. So you have a stretch goal, a reach goal, and then a realistic goal. And I think that's super helpful because then then you figure out what you need to hit each month to get to each of those goals. And then as your year starts to go on, you can kind of see which goal you're closer to hitting. But make sure to break it down by product and service. And this is something we do with clients that we work with. We actually build out a revenue model for them, revenue projections, and an Excel model that shows them like, okay, what are your products or services listed out? How much do each of them cost? And if you want to hit a specific revenue number, how many of each of these do you need to sell? Because it might be a little bit different, right? So like you have different scenarios. I taught this the other day and someone asked like, well, what if I don't know what to charge for a new course? Like build out scenarios in an Excel doc. Like I'll build out a scenario here, a scenario here, and a scenario here. And I'll say, okay, look, if I charge $250 for this course, I'm just making that up, and I sell 10 of them, what does my revenue look like? If I sell 100 of them at $50 a course, what does my revenue look like? And you can really play with those numbers. And I think the more that you know these numbers and the more that you dive into them, the more empowered you feel towards hitting these goals. One thing we also look at that I think I didn't really do at the Stylist LA, but I think is really helpful is looking at your funnel and knowing conversion numbers. So like in our revenue roadmap that we build out for clients, we put in like, okay, let's say your conversion for email is like 6%. How many email subscribers do you need to hit that customer goal? If your Instagram conversion is 2%, like how many Instagram followers do you need to be adding each month to hit that goal? You can come up with those numbers for LinkedIn or for TikTok or for anything else you use. But that was a really helpful way for me to see, even if those numbers weren't exact, how much we needed to be like increasing our visibility by, if that makes sense. You could do it with your website, right? Like you have a conversion rate. If you have Google Analytics, what's your conversion rate? Especially if you're a product-based business, and how many web hits do you need to have each month to hit that conversion rate? So to recap, these are the 8 steps to hitting 6 figures. I want to just see, does anyone have any questions before I shift to the workbook? I know this is a lot of info and I've been going really fast. I'm happy to answer any questions. So even if it's like not fully related to this, feel free to ask them in the chat while I go ahead and open up the workbook. I just want to go through the workbook page by page to just make sure I didn't miss anything. And these are all steps that my co-founder and I actually, like we sat down, we've iterated on these steps for the last 6 months. And these are steps that we're like, look, this is how we truly scale businesses. And with coaching and consulting for other female founders, I'm like, these are the things that they've needed to truly hit those next levels. So this isn't something where we're just like, oh, we think these would work. These are things that we've actually utilized to scale and grow businesses. Okay, let me go to, and since
I did have a question. This is Tiffany.
Hi, Tiffany.
I think on your slide around kind of like expanding your reach and just like giving, I feel like in my early days, I did a lot of that. And now I'm like trying to set more boundaries around my time. And so I'm just trying to figure out like how you figure out what that balance is between just like giving so much, but then also, you know, not exerting too much like free emotional labor.
So I'm actually really glad you said that because I've gone through that as well. So at the beginning of the Stylist LA, I gave everything and I would do free stuff and I would collab with anyone that asked. And then you get to a point where like, you just can't. So I'll give you an example of something I've done recently. So I know for my business that being in new rooms is really helpful for me to get new clients. So like I need to go to networking events. I have 2 babies. I have 2 businesses and I'm really busy. So I've made it a rule and a goal that I'll go to 2 a month and only 2. And that just is something I was like, this works for me. This sounds great. So maybe you're like, it depends on what exactly you're talking about with giving. So maybe you're like collaborations. I'll do 2 collaborations a month or 1. And with like giving in groups, maybe you're like, okay, look, I'll go into Dreamers and Doers I like putting parameters around things. Like maybe I'll go into the Dreamers and Doers feed for an hour every Tuesday and comment on people's stuff. Maybe I'll do one thing I've been thinking about adding in is like 2 coffee chats a month, 2 virtual coffee chats, but putting a limit on it so that you're like, look, maybe it's only 1 and maybe some months you're too busy. If you're a product-based company and a holiday's coming up, you're like, I can't do any actually. I'm going to start doing them in January, but putting numbers. And also maybe you put like, maybe if it's a collaboration request and you're like, look, I'm only doing it with people who I feel super aligned with. So I'm picking less of them. And maybe you have certain like things that they have to have. Maybe they have to have 5,000 followers. Maybe they have to be based in California. I don't know. I'm making it up, but I think just putting parameters around those, because I had to do that too, because as the Stylist LA grew and more people knew me, more people were like, can I pick your brain? Can I pick your brain? Can I pick your brain? And it's like, yes, but at what point, like now I do consulting and coaching, like at what point am I charging people versus letting them pick my brain? And so now what I do is I try and let people pick my brain, but I'll do like 5 of those a month. And right now I can't do 5 just because since I think you missed this, but I'm a 7-week-old. So I'm like half back at work kind of. So yeah, I would put boundaries and parameters around it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think to your point around the pick your brain. So like now I've started hosting like monthly office hours for people who are like in a paid community that I have.
Yep.
But I'm also trying to figure out like, am I being too gatekeepy? But I guess around my time, but I guess it's just like really honing in on like, whether it's those 2 events per month or like trying to channel people in to come to these office hours and stuff like that.
It's funny you say that because we offer that too. And I think the way that I think about it is I actually rarely let people pick my brain now, unless they're new people I don't know. If it's someone that I've already talked to about their business and they're not like, I think it depends. Are they a friend or like a business friend? Then I'd probably, if they were like, I have a quick question about something I'm launching, cool, call me. But if you want to do like a 30-minute chat about your business and it's something that you keep asking questions about, I would push them to paid. But if someone's connecting me with a new person that I've never met, I'm happy to chat with them, but I also keep them short. So like I had a call this morning with someone who like had questions and it was 20 minutes. It's hard to keep it that short. It's hard to get like everything. Like I went over by 5 minutes, but I feel you on that because it's also, you don't want to be selling everyone, right? Like I want to help people. I don't want to be like, pay me to every person that asks for help. So I think it's just coming up with that and making sure that if it's someone that's constantly asking, you're pushing them to paid. And tactical business advice, like, hey, can you look at my email copy and see if it like that should be paid probably, unless it's like someone that you're in a group with who's like a good business friend of yours who's asking you for one-off help. I feel that though. So, okay. I'm just going to run through this real quick. And if anyone has any other questions, please let me know. This is the workbook. I gave you guys the link. I think this is a really helpful workbook to spend some time and really think through. So right here is obviously we did this at the beginning, but list the problems your business is solving. Here are the steps. Focus on your zone of genius. This is, again, I've said this, but I think this is one of the biggest ones on this page or in this presentation, because I think this is something that truly helps you go from founder to CEO. So write down the things that are your zone of genius, the things that only you can do. Time audits. This isn't linked to the template, but I can add it. I think time audits are one of the best things you can do. I don't know if you guys have ever used Clockify, but it's what we use actually to audit our time. And it's really helpful to see. I audit my time like probably twice a year because I'll be like, where productivity is something that I think is a superpower of mine, has become one too, especially since becoming a mom. And I always want to check in to be like, what am I doing? And one of the ways actually I've been better at productivity is setting time blocks for calls. So I like won't have a certain number of calls a day. I cap it at 4 calls because I'm like, I actually have to get work done. I find if I'm on calls all day, I'm not getting any work done. So I highly suggest doing a time audit. What are some easy tasks to use for procrastination? This is something I talk about a lot because I see founders researching in the Google rabbit hole, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and not actually. Oh, another one is taking courses. Oh my God. People will be like, I took 10 courses to try and launch this product or service and I never launched it. And I'm like, please God, stop taking courses and freaking launch it. So make sure you're being aware of these things. What are the easier tasks that you're really using for procrastination? And keep in mind, I'm not telling you not to do these tasks. You can still do them, but maybe set a time limit on it. Can you do it for 20 minutes a day? If it's something you love, like say you love updating your website, but it's not something you need to be doing all the time. Great. Give yourself some time to do it. Just set parameters around it. Systems, just writing out what the things are that you do that are replicable and things that you could systemize. Tasks I can templatize, marketing, weekly emails. These are things we all talked about. So I don't need to keep going with that. I talked about this a little bit, like what is not working in my current schedule and what is working? How can I optimize it? I think really thinking through like, what do you hate doing? And how can we pass that off? How can we systemize that and pass it off to a VA? I liked doing our event-based stuff for my founder circle at the beginning. And then I was like, this is taking up so much time and I am over it. And so we passed it on to the VA because it was not something I needed to be doing. Creating graphics and things like that. I might like it, but it was not money making and it was not something that only I could do. So just making sure you're really honest with yourself about your schedule, I think is important. Like, where are you spending your time? What can you systemize to free up brain space and to free up time? Consistency. I like this little checklist, which just making sure that all of your, I'm going to put the content calendar in the chat. Hold on. Content calendar template that I have for you all, putting in the chat. Oh, wait, sorry. And just so you know, for this content calendar, you can put in your own channels and it goes by month and day, but you can put in like your own channels on the side. We actually use this at my founder circle as a launch calendar as well. Okay, so I gave you guys that. And then yeah, this little checklist and just making sure that you are being consistent in what you're putting out in the world. And here's just a little bit of a worksheet on, what's the transformation you're providing, making sure that your brand aesthetic and copy really communicate what you want it to with your customer and making sure that that's consistent across all channels and consistent throughout the year. Here's a checklist for internal consistency. I think company culture is really important here. Really just making sure that your company, your internal processes are very consistent. Joy breaks. This is something super that we're super passionate about, is making sure that you're your own boss, giving yourself breaks, give yourself time off, pay yourself, take vacations. You will show up as your best self when you do these things. I made the mistake at Stylist LA of putting myself last. I put everyone before me, my employees, my investors, my vendors, my customers, and it really took a toll. So that's just something, this is just a little PSA in here to just remember to take care of yourself. You will show up as a much better founder if you do. This we went over already. Become a leader. This is just a workbook, worksheets to type in, what we talked about with the presentation. Product excellence. Here's a little checklist of what you should be doing. I think honest testimonials are important too. So a lot of times, like asking for anonymous testimonials is really helpful because you want people to be super honest with you so you can get better. So like that's what we did with our mastermind. We said these are completely anonymous because we want to really truly know how you're feeling about the program so far. At the end, we had them give non-anonymous ones so we could post them. But throughout the process, the ones they gave us were anonymous so that they would feel comfortable sharing their honest thoughts. Intentionality and why. This is just same from the presentation, and then a worksheet to fill out how you think through that. Know your numbers. What is your revenue projected for this year? What are your expenses? What's your profit projected to be? And then we have here, making sure you know your average spend per customer. What's your lifetime value? What's your attrition rate? Just figure out for your company, what are the KPIs that you need to know that give you a true view of how your company is performing. And then when we're thinking forward, what's your yearly revenue goal for next year? What's your monthly goal? How many clients or sales do you need a month to hit that goal? This just helps you with planning and helps you really like dial into how you actually are going to hit these goals. Like if you want to hit 6 figures, we've got to have a plan to get there. And that's why we like building out revenue roadmaps. So as I said, these are the 8 steps to 6 figures. If anyone has any other questions, I'll just tell you at the end of this workbook, it's mine and my co-founders' bios. And we launch our next mastermind September 22nd, and we have a few more spots. So if anyone is interested in that, all of the information is at the end of this workbook. It's an 11-week program, a combination of one-on-one and group work, and we really act as your co-founders for those 11 weeks. If anyone has any questions about that, let me know, but that information is at the end here. Does anyone have any questions about anything?
This was so good.
Oh, thank you.
I loved just how step by step and super clear everything was. I love tangible. So this was amazing. If anyone has any last questions, feel free to unmute yourself or drop it in the chat. But thank you so much, Emily, for sharing this resource with us and just sharing your wealth of knowledge. We are so grateful for you.
Of course. Thank you. And yeah, tactical, tangible is our motto, because I think like a lot of the advice I got as a founder, I was like, how do I actually implement this? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And so that's really what the goal was. So I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, I know. I feel like there's so many different things one could be working on. It's really helpful to have like, okay, these are the 8 things that will actually move the needle in your business. So
and one other thing, Tiffany raised her hand, but one thing I want to say is I'm super active on Instagram. So if you guys have any questions, any thoughts, anything, DM me. So I'm always there. Okay, Tiffany, what's up?
I think one thing I am reflecting on is, I just saw my own personal brand kind of like explode over the last 2 years. And I've been running, like, I call it like D&D for disabled people, like a membership community for disabled leaders. But that one, like literally how much we've made this whole year, like I've made like way more than that through my personal brand. And so I'm trying to figure out like, but I feel like so much more impact through what we're doing through the community. So I guess I was reflecting on like that point that you made around like, when do you like sunset something that isn't working? And like, yeah,
that's super hard. And I think it's funny because I can relate somewhat where like my work with the Stylist, I personally made very little money, very little, because everything went back into the company. And now with my founder circle and consulting and that kind of stuff, I make more money and it's more profitable. And so I had that struggle too, a little bit different, of like, how do I split my time? And I have investors on the Stylist side. So like, I have to keep running that company. I think you just have to be really honest with yourself. I think if it's something you love and you're happy to be doing it, I would keep doing it, but set a time limit. Or maybe you're like, look, my personal brand has to make X or is going to make X. And maybe you also hire a VA to help with the community to free up time. I think that's something that we all struggle with when we have like multiple revenue streams, which is great. We want multiple revenue streams. And I think it's actually great to have multiple businesses. But yeah, I think being honest with yourself, like, is it something you want to get rid of, or is it something you maybe want to change, or can you delegate some of it out?
Yeah. I also think this conversation helped me realize that I technically am running multiple businesses. So actually like having that mindset is helpful. Thank you.
Of course. And the way that I work through that, by the way, is major time blocking. So like, I'll be like, okay, the Stylist only needs 3 hours today. And then my founder circle gets 4. Or like the Stylist LA doesn't need as much for me, but I'll be like, okay, this Monday, I'm only doing Stylist LA. And then maybe I'll spend an hour in the middle of that day checking emails for my founder circle. But that's the way that I like compartmentalize it majorly. Because if I don't, then I'm kind of like, I just feel like I'm like ADD and like just going from one thing to the other too quickly. So I appreciate that question a lot.
Thank you everyone for showing up, asking such great questions. Thank you, Emily, for investing in the collective in this way. We are so grateful for you. And again, thank you so much for these resources. We'll be sure to include them in the recording. We'd love to know what you love about our events, what we can improve, what you'd love to see. We're always all ears for feedback. So Thank you so much, everyone. It was such a treat getting to learn alongside you today. And thank you again, Emily.